As a historian, I work to preserve and reframe the stories of others, sometimes working them into a broader narrative that is generally unknown or ignored. It is in searching through the remnants of the past that we find lessons and discoveries to shape ourselves today. History is alive and relevant, ever-changing, because it is inherently tied to the ongoing story of humankind. The beauty in history is found in the stories of individuals, who may often appear insignificant in the grand scheme of things. Across the wide variations in the lives of individuals, as defined by their own time and space, there are two common elements in all of our stories. We are born, and someday we die. Unfortunately for some women, this is happening at what should be one of the happiest times of their lives. Each year across the globe, several million babies are lost during pregnancy or quickly after birth, and over 500,000 mothers die as a result of their pregnancy and the child's delivery. In fact, every minute across the globe, a woman dies in childbirth or as a result of a pregnancy-related condition. A painfully large difference in survival statistics is found between countries and between racial groups within countries, with the majority of maternal deaths occurring in developing regions. However, developing countries are not the only ones facing problems with maternal death. This is also the reality in contemporary American society, with class and race as factors in the health of women. In fact, the US has the highest rate of maternal mortality in the developed world, and that rate is continuing to rise. Our national maternal mortality statistic is 21 per 100,000 births, meaning that over 700 women die each year in the US from causes related to pregnancy or childbirth, with the most common deaths resulting from cardiovascular complications and infections. This means that statistically, women in the US are 3 times more likely to die in childbirth than women in the United Kingdom. The US and Serbia are the only 2 developed nations with increased maternal mortality rates since 1990. Furthermore, Black women in the United States have a maternal mortality rate 2 to 3 times higher than that of white women, with other minority women also affected by higher risk. And at least 60% of all maternal deaths in the US are preventable. This growing problem of maternal mortality in the US has begun to receive the attention it deserves. Serena Williams, an internationally renowned tennis star, spoke out about her experience of nearly losing her own life following the birth of her daughter in 2017. Furthermore, NPR launched a series to shed light on the stories of these women, or lost mothers, as they called them. This visual comes from that study, and while it specifically only shows data from 2015 until 2015 in this image, the picture is clear in comparison to other developed nations. So, after so many scientific and social advances, how is this happening in our system? In order to understand it, we must first explore how the mainstream modern practice of childbirth came to be and its immediate implications. The higher chance of minority mothers dying as a result of pregnancy cannot be ignored, and we will hopefully see the connections between developments in medicine and developments in society. Once seen as both scientific and mysterious, attitudes toward childbearing have evolved drastically over time. Also, the setting has shifted from the ancient historical practice dominated by women in the home to the modern field of obstetrics in its hospital setting. A critical turning point in these changes is during the Enlightenment, in the late 1700s, with the rise of the Man Midwife in Scotland. We will get to that term in a minute, as well as this visual, but first, try to imagine how startling it must have been for a family who, for example, lived in Glasgow in the 1780s, for them to stop by their friend's house to see a new baby, only to hear that the parents had intentionally hired a man to deliver the baby. There was not much precedent for men intentionally being in charge of the birth of a baby, so the term Man Midwife was used. Their profession was certainly new and rather contrary to the existing moral standard. However, it quickly became a trend and then the norm to have a man midwife in charge of labor and delivery. These male physicians attending to women's matters, rather than experienced traditional female midwives, ushered in new medical approaches and cultural norms that had far-reaching implications. Thus, the modern institution of maternal and child health finds roots in the medical and societal phenomenon of the rise of the man midwife, as displayed in 18th century Enlightenment era Scotland. This caricature depicts a single figure split in two. On its left, we see it as the right, is a traditional female midwife, whereas the right shows the new man midwife. The caricature is clear in its depiction of both, with the female midwife in front of a lit fire, providing a comfortable atmosphere in a domestic setting. In contrast, the male midwife is in a room with only large surgical tools and bottles of medications. The connotations are clear. So, why was this such a dramatic change? The historical record overwhelmingly indicates that for the majority of human history, women assisted women in delivering their children. In Europe, these female healers and midwives had no formal induction. Rather, they gained experience and were subsequently accepted by their community. In modern terms, the medical knowledge of an early modern midwife was rudimentary, and yet she had rich experience in all things related to pregnancy, labor and delivery, and postpartum care. Her treatments consisted of natural remedies, as well as basic interventions when needed. Surgery was seldom a viable option. In general, the attendant present at a birth, whether physician or midwife, did not profoundly affect the outcome. Without modern medical advances, such as antibiotics, certain situations simply could not be improved. Eclampsia and infection killed with some frequency. So a midwife's true job was to provide a positive experience for the expectant mother. Her care and support were critical, and the management of the birthing chamber was essential to a smooth process. Thus, to draw in contemporary categories, a midwife's job encompassed the realms of social work, psychology, and health management, as well as medicine. How then, in less than a century, did men come to rule a field that had always been dominated by women? The rise of man midwives, as the early male doctors who specialized in labor and delivery, started gradually and continued over the course of a century. Scotland is an area of strong evidence and compelling groundwork due to the prominent Scot man midwives and their success and establishment during the Enlightenment. Man midwives began to take prominence over traditional female midwives when midwifery itself became medicalized and institutionalized. That institutionalization helped shift societal perspectives and values about the body, especially women's bodies, and allowed for male doctors, the man midwife, to be viewed as better and more favorable than female midwives. Man midwives were a new and profoundly interesting phenomenon. Arguments over science versus morality raged. This image depicts an angry husband who is upset at how comfortable the man midwife seems to be in interacting with his wife. Who gave that man the authority to be that close in proximity to his wife? As upper-class clients utilized the fashionable services of man midwives, word of mouth increased their popularity among society in general, helping to become the norm and not just a passing trend. Thus, favorable gossip and positive publicity became the cornerstone for their success, just as it had been for female midwives throughout history. Now, the Glasgow physician William Hunter, seen here on the left, with books and artifacts in his study, drastically improved both the scientific field of obstetrics and the public's opinion of the practice. A successful physician, or man midwife, he helped normalize his role as a man in his own field. He achieved this in several ways. First, he was good at his job, eventually becoming the royal physician to Queen Charlotte after convincing her to remove her midwife in his favor during the birth of her third child. He was also a dedicated scientist. Hunter's devotion to anatomy is perhaps best displayed in his work Anatomy of the Human Graviton Uterus, with its vivid artistic representations to provide a universal language of the female body and its reproductive functions. On the right is an image from the book of a full-term baby still in the uterus. Something more about his career that connected him to the public in a positive way was his dedication to public lectures, much in the spirit of this event today. He held lectures for the general public, as well as specific ones on reproduction that were only open to certain other professionals and their entourages. The public only got to know so much. Hunter was well known for his massive collection, as well as coins and antiquities. His legacy is displayed today in the Hunterian Museum at the University of Glasgow, and the variety in the collection shows his deep dedication to investigative science, as well as his attempts to educate the public. Subtly reinforced by the presence of books and artifacts in Hunter's portrait, a crucial factor that established the superiority of man midwives was found in their scientific learning. Midwifery had long been regarded as an art or a mystery. However, the Enlightenment era saw a growing public understanding of, appreciation for, and fascination with science. This image of French Enlightenment thinkers discussing a new work at a salon or the Enlightenment gathering places is a classic representation of the Enlightenment, and often what most of us think of. A consensus that knowledge was found through careful and systematic thought and reason, not simply personal experience, became celebrated again during this era and began tipping the power away from midwives. Giving birth had long been viewed as a natural process, whereas the emerging science came to view the process as a mechanism. A deepening understanding of animal reproduction led to a sense of male authority on female reproduction and its workings, thus reinforcing the inferior status of traditional female midwives. So, many factors hold society and medicine together, and it goes back and forth. The rise of man midwives in the 18th century Scotland laid the foundation for modern maternal and child health practices, which are far more advanced and successful, but with some practices coming at a possible price. In their early days, man midwives were closely associated with an overuse of tools and interventions. Going back to this image, we see the depiction of the tools of the man midwife. On our left, the image is right. This professional change ultimately resulted in higher survival outcomes, but it was still flawed considering the overall mortality rates and sociocultural gap that was established even back then. Over 2 centuries later, the realm of maternal and child health still faces significant medical and sociocultural issues. The precedence of man midwives in the 18th century Scotland coincided with changes in family and professional environments. This timing of the rise of the man midwife, where professionally trained men replaced traditionally trained women, signaled a bigger shift based on underlying sociocultural influences, as well as well-publicized medical advancements and institutionalization that exists in maternity. So, what does any of this mean for us? Obviously, at the time that man midwives began to take prominence in the field, the United States had become an independent nation. However, our political separation did not sever all ties, and social and educational connections across the Atlantic helped the American system adopt critical elements of British medicine, including the favoring of the man midwife, who simply came to be regarded as the normal medical doctor, today's obstetrician. So, looking to Scotland in the late 1700s provides essential background for understanding how medicine evolves. The rise of the man midwife and his replacement of the traditional midwife was in part the result of a social and cultural shift. Medicine is not rooted purely in science. New technologies and tools to assist in childbirth further reinforce the cultural shift, where men could not only be accepted, but actually preferred as caregivers in this setting. And these trends spread out across the European continent and across the Atlantic to the US. Fast forward through 2 centuries, and here we are today. We have made great advances and have pioneered many medical techniques in this nation, but it cannot be ignored that the US maternal mortality trend is increasing in opposition to a general global decrease. We must not be stuck in the past, but there is validity in searching through its sources for answers. It is impossible to adequately explore and describe the vast and complex factors that are contributing to the rise of maternal deaths in our country in a single setting. However, We must start somewhere, and awareness is a critical first step. Taking the time to understand how today's institutionalized health systems have developed is a piece of the puzzle, especially in regard to maternal and child health. Just as 18th century Britain faced a social reckoning with medical advancements, there is a definitive social element to the issue of maternal mortality today. The disparity in outcomes of a pregnancy between mothers of different races, who is living and who is dying, is astounding, often intertwined with larger sociocultural issues and bordering on social injustice. Why are we accepting that it is more dangerous for a woman to give birth here in Nebraska than it is in any other developed country in the world? By themselves, science and society are both complex. Together, in the real world, they are fused into an even larger and more critical puzzle. Americans should be neither complacent nor ignorant about the factors in our rising national percentage of maternal deaths. And so, this is the topic that I invite all of you to consider. Thank you.